Bold leaders, no buzzwords, no BS. This is Mastering Workplace Culture, real talk on crafting workplace cultures that deliver results. Each episode, we go beyond corporate speak and talk with leaders who've actually done it. Those who've faced breakdowns, made bold moves, and built organizations where respect and results carry equal weight. If you're ready to challenge assumptions, gain actionable inspiration from proven mentors, and build a workplace culture that actually works, this podcast is for you.
Hello, I'm Chris Edmonds, and you can see I'm joined by Mark Babbitt and Garry Ridge. This is the Mastering Workplace Culture podcast, which you've already heard about. But let me introduce Garry. Garry and I we go back a ways. I'm a little older than Garry is, so my memory is not quite as firm. But let me give you the background. Some of you may know Garry well. He's probably one of the best known CEOs on the planet. And he was 35 years with the WD-40 company and 25 as the chairman and CEO. We're going to talk a bit about that. His official title today is Chairman Emeritus of the WD-40 company, which means you don't really have to be involved in day-to-day ops at all, which might be a kind of a cool thing for you at this stage. Garry is a culture architect, a speaker, an executive coach. He's an adjunct professor at the University of San Diego in their Master of Executive Leadership program, which is where we met 20 years ago. He's the best-selling author of Helping People Win at Work, which was published in 2009 with the marvelous Ken Blanchard. And his new book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, which we are definitely going to talk about. And I've got dumbassery happening in my head all the time. Maybe more important, Garry is a son, a brother, a husband, a dad, and a grandpa. So, Garry, welcome to the show.
Hey, g'day, Chris. G'day, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you. And yes, we did meet, and I'll tell you when it was. It was the year 2000. So we met 25 years ago. I may have had some hair, and yours might have been a different color.
It might have been a little bit darker back then. Yeah, this is all... It is what it is. This is genetics. So there's no added effort on my part really in the mornings. So let's talk about your flight to San Diego. You talk about that in both your books from Sydney, and you had been with WD-40 for, 5-8 years at that stage, I think, but you were flying to San Diego, and I believe your role was to help bring the WD-40 company into a more global kind of marketplace, whereas it had been very much domestic U.S. focused. Do I have that right?
Yeah. I started with WD-40 in Australia in 1987, and I was asked to move to San Diego in 1994. You're correct. The brand was a very strong brand in the U.S. It had sprinkles of business in other parts of the world. But in the mid-'80s, late 80s, the leadership then had identified that there was an opportunity to take the blue and yellow can with a little red top to the world. So in 94, they asked me to come on over and help them do that.
And as you think about culture, what was the culture like as you came in with a charge of literally, let's expand this globally, which means there's going to be some countries we start from scratch. We've got some footholds in others, but was the leadership of the organization ready for that challenge?
No, it wasn't. And it wasn't their fault. And it wasn't because the culture was bad, Chris and Mark. It was a company that was best, I would say, insular in that it was very US centric. There were a couple of people in the organization that I would say had a global point of view, particularly the guy that I work for, who was the then president, Jerry Schleif. He was very much aligned with global, but there was not many other people within the organization that didn't see international expansion, anything else but this is a nice opportunity to go to a country that I've never been to before, which is not how you set up a global organization. And it was really the trigger to my curiosity about how do you build a culture on a brand where the sun will never set. And that's really what was my trigger. The sun was never going to set on that can. So I didn't want a culture where organizations in some other country had to wait till the sun rise in San Diego to quack up the hierarchy to get some direction or decision.
Boy, that's wild.
Garry, anybody who knows you knows that your desired culture is based strongly on values. So as you began this worldwide launch, what were the core issues you wanted a values-based culture to address? And how did you apply that to many, not just countries, but cultures?
Yeah. So values to me were there to protect people and set them free. And let me kind of move the story a little bit in that even though I moved here in 94, I didn't become CEO till 97. I was director of international and vice president of international. And I became CEO in 97. And it was at that time where I thought, I know how, with my team, how to market the brand. But how do you set this culture? And now I'll go to a different plane flight. It's 1998, 1999. I'm on a Qantas 747. I'm flying from Los Angeles to Sydney. I'm at 38,000 feet, 2 a.m. in the morning. And as you do when you travel, you take some stuff to read. And I read a quote from the Dalai Lama. And the quote was, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool thing to think about. How can we create an organization where happiness is not necessarily, happy, joy, but it means fulfillment in the role I'm doing. And then I read a second quote, and it was from Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC. And that quote was, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I went, oh, duh, of course. If you really enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do it better than if you don't enjoy it. So fast forward a little bit longer, I get back to San Diego and I read an article in the local paper, the Union Tribune, and it talks about a master's degree in leadership at the University of San Diego. And that degree program was put together by Ken Blanchard and the Ken Blanchard companies and USD. And there was an information night. And I thought maybe I should go and listen to this. And I'd never met Ken. This is 1999. I'd never met Ken. I'd read his stuff. I was aware of him. So I went to this information session and Ken said, most leaders think about getting people in the head. We got to start getting people in the heart as well. And I went, I think there's something in this. So a little bit more research. And I then enrolled in that master's program. So now here I am. I'm 2 years into a position of a US public company CEO, and I went back to school because I wanted to confirm what I thought I knew and learn what I didn't know. And that's where I learned the power of a servant-based leadership organization based on values. So that was a long answer to your question, Mark, but it was, and then Ken was the one who really made me aware of the power of a hierarchical set of values. So we actually then started to look at what are the values that we wanted to have in the company and then what was more important than anything else. And we came up with a set of 6 hierarchical values. And our message to the team and the tribe was, you should be able to make any decision you want to make at any time in the world, anywhere, if you use our values to make that decision. And we implanted that into the thinking and the action of the company. And that's exactly what happened. So people around the world were able to make decisions if they used our values to make that decision. So that was the protection and setting people free bit about not having to quack up the hierarchy to make a decision.
You just mentioned the tribe terminology, which was very much embedded early on. Had the tribe thinking happened before you were granted the responsibility as CEO?
No, because the tribe philosophy was based on the need that organizations have to belong. We all know Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization, right? The first 2 rungs are basically, can I survive and am I safe? The third one is love or belonging. I was really aware of the fact, not just at WD-40, there was a sense of belonging, But organizations weren't acting and treating like people like they actually did belong. So I said, well, teams are something you play on to win a specific game. What we wanted to do was build an organization that was enduring over time. And the thing that's been enduring over time from mankind's start is the thinking of a tribe. And now, tribe was not a reflection of any indigenous group, but it was going back to the caveman, right? And when you think about the major responsibility of a tribal leader, it's to be a learner and a teacher. So by saying we are going to be a tribe, and the number one responsibility of a tribal leader was to be a learner and a teacher, and a teacher has to be a great coach, that was the reason we brought in the aspect of tribalism. And there are others, tribes have values, they have specialized skills, they're future focused, they're warriors, they have celebration. So I could talk about these attributes in the organization. Learners and teachers value, all of this was fitting into a place where people felt like and were treated like they belong.
Garry, as you set out on this course, and you're talking about tribes and you're talking about hierarchical values, what was the reaction you first got from the people that have been around a while? Chris and I talk about in our book, we talk about how the people that are most likely to resist change are older white men. We call it boomer male syndrome. And I imagine at WD-40 back then, you had a few older white men underneath you. When you approached them with this, what was their initial reaction?
You're drinking too much of Ken Blanchard's Kool-Aid.
Which might have been true, but thank God you did.
Yes. And, it wasn't only those around. Remember, this is the year 2000. And so I'm talking about culture, all of this stuff people didn't talk about. Like, if you think getting some feedback from internal was interesting, I was going to Wall Street and I was talking to analysts and investors. And the first 5 pages of my investor presentation were always about how are we going to build the culture in the organization that has high will of the people? And here's what we're doing. And, I could see them kind of entertaining me, thinking, get to page 7 where the numbers are. That's all we want to know about.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't give up on that, because I was convinced that the strategic plan was fine. We can write a really good strategic plan. But here's the magic, Chris and Mark. If only 30% of your people go to work every day and are enthusiastically executing against the strategic plan, 30 times 70 is a number. But if 80 or 90% of your people are going to work every day, enthusiastically executing against the strategic plan in good times and in not so good times, your deliverable is going to be much higher. It's simple math. The will of the people times strategy equals outcome. Simple, not easy, and time is not your friend.
Well, and you were right. It was very much against common Wall Street thinking and investor thinking. How long did it take some of the naysayers within the WD-40 company to begin to see the rationale and the benefit?
About 5 years. Now, it worked a little differently too, because as you may remember, Chris, I so valued that master's program. I started to send people to the program. So every year, 1 or 2 of my senior people, I would sponsor them, or we would sponsor them on a full ticket to go and take that master's program. So I was building, a camaraderie of support around me by them doing that. So, and it took a little while. There were naysayers. And of course, I don't blame them, Mark and Chris, because they had to trust that what we were saying and what we were doing was real and not just, some fairy dust program that we sprinkled on and the company expected everything to change. Because culture equals values plus behavior times consistency. And this is where so many organizations get it wrong. They think, they can bring some training and development company and sprinkle some fairy dust over the company and, everything's going to change. culture is not a microwavable event. It's a crockpot approach.
Yeah, yeah, and I was blessed to be on the faculty of that executive leadership program for 7 years and loved learning about the WD-40 company journey from one or two or three folks in each cohort. It was marvelous to be able to do that. And you're right, the biggest challenge that I think any organization undergoing culture refinement, culture change, is you've got folks that have been trained to be what they are today, and you're going to try and get them to change their behaviors in the absence of proof quite yet, maybe. And so that, and Mark has helped me understand the power of social proof to really accelerate leaders' willingness to say, you want me to be a coach? I'm just going to tell them what to do or what have you. And my guess would be that there was a portion of, and we talk about leaders a lot. I'd love your answer, Garry, to this question. First is, we're convinced that leaders drive the culture. And therefore, you've got to have all those leaders of one heart, one mind, one heart, literally, or it's never going to gain traction. Would you agree with that? Is that your experience there?
Well, the fish rots from the head, right? So, and the fish survives from the head. And I think two things, and this is one of the things I learned when I was teaching at USD. We had students in the program that'd say, I really am enthusiastic about using this, but I have a soul-sucking leader. Here he is. This is Alec, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated, right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to do this because they're command and control. His ego eats his empathy instead of his empathy eating, or she, it could be Alice, don't get me wrong. This person's a micromanager. They think they're corporate royalty. They love a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They do not value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they don't keep their commitments. This is Alec or Alice, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated. And, so I would say yes, but if you can't change that person, which you can't do, you can't change anybody. People have to want to change. Then do it in the sphere of influence you have. And we had a number of different, people who did that within their organization. And suddenly they're saying, I want to go and work in Mark's department over there. Why are they all, enthusiastic? Because they're treated like they belong. They know the work they do matters and they're respected for it. There's a high degree of psychological safety because they're not fearing failure. They're really cherishing the learning moment. And their leader is acting as a coach, not as a manager. This word manager is terrible. You manage your bank account, you manage inventory, you don't manage people. We're there to coach people because the number one responsibility of a tribal leader is to be what? A learner and a teacher.
Yep. I wonder about you in the chainmail armor on a horse riding up Wall Street to the stock market headquarters. And those same Wall Street analysts from years before are remembering this values, tribal, trusting work culture that you built. That was a pretty cool celebration of all of your team members throughout the globe, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. And it was actually Times Square. I rode the horse into Times Square because the NASDAQ stock market, which we're on, is actually on Times Square. So
That's right.
It's 9:30 in the morning, and I'm riding a horse in a suit of chainmail into Times Square to open the NASDAQ stock exchange. So, and I think that was really also a way of really showing the tribe that I'm prepared to be vulnerable. I'm prepared to take the risk on their behalf. Because, if you think about it, and I'll go back just a second to something that I think is really interesting around my book. A lot of people have asked me, why did you call the book Any Dumb ASS Can Do It? Well, here's the deal, and you'll get what I mean because it relates to the horse riding. The word ASS is not referring to someone's bottom or posterior. It's referring to a donkey. And maybe my next book will be called Donkey Leadership. But donkeys get a bad rap. People think they're just stubborn or slow. But let me tell you the truth. Donkeys are steady. They keep going long after others give up. They're loyal companions. You can count on them when the road gets rough. They're practical, not flashy. They know how to conserve energy and get the job done. And while they might not always rush into things, Chris, that caution often keeps them safe. So when I say any dumbass can do it, what I really mean is you don't have to be brilliant to be a great leader. You just need a bit of courage, ride a horse into Times Square if you like, a lot of care, and the humility to keep learning. Because like the donkey, leadership isn't about showing off. It's about carrying the load, sticking with the journey, and helping others get to where they need to go.
What you described there, and I'm anxious now for the next book, we talk about authentic care from folks that are in leadership positions. And that's hard to teach, I think. But the coach and learner and teacher emphasis, I think you probably saw people you might not have guessed would make a transition into that role, did so. And,
Yeah,
and were there some that took a little extra teaching?
and some that decided they would be happy somewhere else. But then also, too, I think we have a tendency to camouflage issues with confusion to make out how smart we are. So let's talk about coaching for a moment. When we said everyone's going to be a coach, we changed the titles of people in the organization. We didn't have managers anymore. We call them coaches. But then we said, what? And then the folks in the organization said, so what does that mean? So we're able to describe it, right? A great coach is committed to helping the player get an A, and they know the game. A great coach is brave, not protecting their own comfort zone at the expense of someone else's growth. So they're okay about giving redirection. They never, ever, ever run on the field and take the ball. If you think about micromanagement, it's people running on the field, taking the ball. They spend their time on the sideline watching the play, so they're engaged in the business. They add value to the player with feedback on how to improve the play. They never, ever, ever, ever go to the podium and pick up the prize. And we'll think about the leaders who take the praise away from people so they don't feel like they matter anymore. And Chris and Mark, they spend a lot of time in the stinky locker room building trust. They're not that corporate royalty CEO who never goes to the cafeteria or canteen to have coffee because someone's delivering it to their desk if they can get through the locked door in the big corner office.
And I think one of the things that Mark and I talk about a lot with any organization that comes to us and is interested in a culture refinement is the idea of accountability. And we just had a couple of sessions yesterday. We've got two more with a current client on, and accountability is one of their values. And the conversations we had about, so, kind of what pain points do you guys all have? And these were frontline plant players, not managers or soups. Talk about language driving interesting assumptions, right? Smart people. And their frustration was accountability because they would have teams they're working with or they hand off at the end of their shift. And frustration about, well, why didn't you tell me that was broken? How come I had to wait 2 hours before the darn thing blew up, right? And so the idea of accountability cross organizational typical boundaries.
Well, yeah, and there's two things that we used, two tools we used around that. Firstly, of course, the book I wrote with Ken, which is helping people win at work. And the byline is, don't mark my paper, help me get an A. So the first question is, do people in your organization know what an A looks like? And accountability is pretty simple. Do they know what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and to the standard they're supposed to do it to? And most organizations don't go to the depth of doing that. But secondly, there's this other disease that runs through an organization. It's called the na disease, the finger pointing disease, right? And it's what you just shared. So we said we are going to have a pledge within the organization that puts the responsibility of knowing and telling on the feet of everybody. So we created this thing and we called it the Maniac Pledge. And here it is. I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them. And that was the pledge we took in the organization from top to bottom to take away the na disease, the finger pointing disease, because we said the responsibility, and listen to the first three words, I am responsible. So everybody was responsible. So, someone swapping the shift couldn't say to the person coming in, well, you didn't tell me. We took the pledge. You should have. So let's have a conversation about why that's not happening.
Well, you just defined accountability. And that, Chris and I, as we continue our practice, especially since we talk so much about accountability in our last book, Good Comes First, almost every client comes up to us now and says, that's our number one thing. And we didn't even think about it. We hadn't even thought about this until you guys wrote an entire paragraph on it. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that's where we're failing. And we had a certain set of values even before we read the book, but we didn't hold anybody accountable for living them, modeling them, coaching them. And if we happen to be talking to a CHRO or the director of human resources, many times it's volunteered that the CEO himself doesn't model those values. So, which brings me to our next question, Garry. You've already mentioned a couple, but at WD-40 and in your consulting practice now, have you ever had a hurdle or an obstacle become so huge that you thought or your client thought, you know what? I can't do this. This is not going to work. I've tried. I'm hitting the wall. There's nothing I can do from here. And if you ever did have a hurdle or an obstacle like that, what did you do about it?
Well, I heard an obstacle. Are you asking me, could we not make a decision around it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean,
we didn't. We never did, because we used our values to guide us, in which direction we wanted to go. And, our first value at WD-40 was we value doing the right thing. And the thing that's interesting is each one of our values had a written paragraph underneath it of what doing the right thing meant in our company, because we wanted doing the right thing in San Diego to be the same doing the right thing in Beijing as it is in Buenos Aires or Madrid. So we had to put a parameter around what that doing the right thing meant. And, we lived these values. In fact, we used to meet, our coaches were mandated to meet with the people they coach at a minimum every 90 days. And in that one-on-one session, we would ask our tribe members to tell us examples of how they lived our values in the last 90 days. And we only had two measurements of this. You either lived them or you visited them. And we said, we don't want a lot of visitors. So over time, was embedded. This is the way we make decisions around here. So we would sit in a meeting and something, well, is that going to do the right thing? Is that going to create a positive, lasting memory? Is that going to make it better today than it was yesterday? Is that going to support our tribe? Is this something we can act on? Our last value, funnily enough, was, will this sustain the WD-40 economy, which was about profitability? And you would think as a public company, that should be our number one value. Our whole position was, if we live the first five, the sixth one happens.
A quick follow-up question. So you have these values over time embedded. You've hired and coached your leaders to be good coaches over the years, and along comes the pandemic. How did those embedded values help WD-40 thrive, even in the worst economy that the planet had seen in decades?
They helped survive because they were the foundation to the 93% employee engagement we had going into the pandemic, and the 93% employee engagement we had coming out of the pandemic. So, we thrived during that time because we had a highly engaged workforce who knew and felt like they belonged, and we kept doing that. And let me give you an example of something in the pandemic that really blew me away and really was what I would call my career mic drop. So it's January 2021. We're a year into the pandemic. And from the previous March, we had worked on continuing to keep our tribe together as best we can. When the pandemic hit, we said we only have three objectives. Number one, the safety and the well-being of our people is our number one objective. Number two, to service our customers the best we can, when we can, where we are. Number three, to protect the underbody of our business so we will thrive when this is over. That was a bit like hope. So we come to January 2021. We've done all we could, and we think we're doing well. And I said to our leadership team, I want to make sure we're not draining cultural equity here, that we're not losing it because of the environment we're in. Let's do a pulse survey and test to see where we are. We'd actually just completed our employee opinion survey in March, just before the pandemic started. So we went out and we did a pulse survey, and the results came back, and they were equal to what they were in March, except for one question. And this measure went up. The statement is, I am excited about my place in the company's future. And it went to 97%. 97% of our people globally said they were excited about their place in the company's future. And I went back and I said, go check the data. This cannot be right. These people, this is January 2021. There's no real sign of a vaccine. What are they talking about? We went back and we checked the data. It was correct. I said, okay, we have to find out why. So we went back and we dug in and we found out why. And the answer we got back? I feel safe.
In an environment where nothing was safe.
They said, if I need to be anywhere right now, I want to be here because I feel like I belong. I know the work I do matter. We're being taken care of. We see there's a future. We weren't laying anybody off. We were, we're doing all this. They said, I feel safe. And it comes back to, we were actually living the just cause of our tribe. And our just cause was a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. That was our just cause. So all of this foundational stuff and everything we'd put in place was actually working. It's like mic drop. And I get goosebumps even now when I talk about it, because I said, if we've proven that this works, this has been the time.
Boy, that is remarkable. And I wonder if any of our listeners would be willing to pose that kind of question in a pulse survey today. They may not get remotely close to a 97% agreement that people feel safe.
Right.
Powerful.
And by the way, we had the best year in the company's history. Now, a lot of your listeners might be thinking, or a lot of those with us today might be, this is all good. This is all, popcorn and pizza and gooey stuff. This is all the soft stuff. This is not soft. This is freaking hard. And if it was soft, we wouldn't have the lousy employee engagement numbers we have now, where today, as you and I are speaking, 70% of people are going to work today disengaged or actively disengaged. And I often say, imagine a place where you go to work each day. You make a contribution to something bigger than yourself. You learn something new, you're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. Happy people build happy families. Happy families build happy communities. Happy communities build a happy world. And we need a happy world. And business today has an opportunity, and I would submit to you a responsibility to make the world a better place by creating cultures where you don't have Al or Alec, the soul sucking CEO. You have an organization where people are going home happy. Now, and by the way, during this period of time, just in case anybody's interested, we took the market cap of the company from 300 million to over 3 billion. We 7x'd revenue, and we took the brand to 176 countries around the world. So now all those CFOs that are sitting out there saying, oh no, this, you can't measure it, BS. We measured it.
Well, and you did so consistently, and you continued under your influence to grow happy families and happy communities. And it leads to one other question I want to ask you about, because I was thinking about the expansion internationally, and especially with 3 years after you had that role officially, you became CEO, and the tribal opportunity was rolled out, the values and the clarity and the Maniac Pledge, which I just love, Garry. Did different countries react more quickly? Were some countries' national cultures influencing, slowing the embracing of the new tribal culture and or accelerating it?
Yeah, of course. As we know, there are direct cultures and there are relationship cultures around the world. So you can imagine the relationship cultures like Spain and Latin America and others, they were pretty quick they want to love the belonging bit. The more direct cultures, in fact, which the US is a direct culture, they were a little standoffish around, do I really want this? But something that I've learned, Chris and Mark, is that whatever you are, Gen X, Gen Y, whatever, wherever you are around the world, in whatever country, knowing that you belong, knowing that you have something to learn, knowing that what you do matters is universal. How you package it to those people, it's up to you. But I haven't met anybody who doesn't really feel better if they know that they belong and they're cared about. And I think that's what it comes down to, the bottom line.
So agree. In Good Comes First, probably our most controversial section of that, Chris, was when we talked about unhappy people go home and make other people unhappy. And pretty soon the community becomes unhappy. Pretty soon our region or maybe even our country becomes unhappy. We talked a lot about, and in our practice today, talk a lot about the importance of well-being, the importance of that safety net values can provide. So with that in mind, let me ask you this. The last 10 years or so, the United States has been a divided place politically, of course. And to your earlier point, no matter what side of the aisle you might metaphorically sit on, people want to feel safe. They want to feel like they belong. But we can take that into overdrive. We'll sacrifice being safe for this feeling of belonging on one side of an argument or the other. How do values, clearly defined, written values, how do they help all of us in these divisive times? When blame is rampant, when deflection is normal, when we can call reporters names when they ask us a question instead of being a leader. How do values help set the rest of us apart?
Well, I guess it comes down to what are those values? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And, I'm not smart enough, nor will I try to walk down the road of why certain people who act certain ways do it when they do it. You can't change anybody. They have to decide to change themselves. What I do know, Mark, is most leaders probably don't get up every day and put up their left hand and say, I want to be Alec today. But they're not aware of how their behavior impacts those they have to lead. Now, there probably are some leaders who get up and say, I am going to be an Alec leader. They don't know that they're calling it Alec, but that's who they are. So again, I can't change the world, but what we can do in our own little circle is what building organizations with cultures where when those people go home and sit around the dinner table, their kids aren't looking at their parents and saying, there is no way I want to do that because I don't want to come home angry and upset like you. No way.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a bit like that story, Chris. I think you know it. A guy's walking along the beach and he picks up a starfish and he throws it into the ocean, right? And he throws another one and someone comes up to him and says, what are you doing? You're saving the star. I said, I'm saving the starfish. He said, how can you save the starfish? There's thousands of them. It doesn't matter. And he picks up a starfish and he throws it into the water. He said, it matters to that one.
Well, one at a time. Exactly.
One at a time. So
well,
let's do this one at a time.
Well, and what I hope people take from this is that a massive change can happen. It can be done. And the simplicity of it is, why don't we get values that define what respect and validation look like in day-to-day relationships in a business? And you've described very well the actual profitability benefits. And I was a nonprofit exec for 15 years, and we still had to make profits to be able to sustain the programs we were running, et cetera. So profits are not a bad thing, no matter what business you're in. But when senior leaders don't understand the impact that they have, they can be pretty dastardly with the environment that they create. And I want to take you to Any Dumbass Can Do It. You talk a lot about your own dumbassery, which cracked me up. But I think, is that the vulnerability that leaders need? And by the way, I've got to show this little QR code up on the top right. This will take you to Amazon, to Any Dumbass Can Do It. So it may be only visible on my screen, Garry, sorry, but it is QR code there for Any Dumbass Can Do It. But is it part of maybe the secret is that leaders can't be stupid anymore about their impact? They've got to be willing to ask, and they have to be willing to learn.
Yeah. And I think, I was just going to pull something up here because something that Mark said that around the values. And our second value was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships, which talks to behavior. And let me just quickly read to you what that value description was. It says, as a result of our interactions with our tribe and stakeholders, we will feel better at the end of the interaction than we did when we began. We will leave with a positive memory of it. Our shareholders should be proud to say they own our stock. Our customers should consider us a part of their business success. Consumers should be glad they bought our products, telling their friends about the quality and the utility of our brands. Our company name and our many brands should become known as emblems of quality, performance, and value. Our tribe members should consider each other as valued friends and colleagues who share works, struggles, success, life, and laughter over the years. The result will be a higher degree of mutual trust and respect if we successfully live this value.
And what I love is that there is it ties back into the Maniac Pledge. I've got to change my behavior in order to have this conversation have any shot of being even neutral, much less negative. And your values and the practices that you put into place clearly embedded themselves in the WD-40, not only the operations, but it's the reactions too. I remember, and I'm old, but I remember you all inviting people to submit success stories of where they used some of your products. And you had a list of like 20,000 uses of WD-40 within a year. It was something outrageous like that.
We had a contest in the year 2000 where we asked people to tell us what's their favorite use. This is before social media was really a buzz. We had 265,000 entries of people telling us their favorite use. This is consumers, which we then diluted down to 2,000 of the most popular uses for the product. And today, I believe, I haven't looked lately, that list still survives on the WD-40 company website of the
I think
2,000
it does.
most popular uses for WD-40. So, it works. But the other thing too, and Mark, one more point on values is values also give you the on-ramp to have the conversation. I'll give you a true story. I was in a leadership meeting one morning, and there was a group of us in a room, and there was someone in the room who was not living our second value, which is creating a positive, lasting memory. They were having a bad morning. They were one of those times where someone was sucking the energy out of the room. You've been there. You know what that's like, right? Now, this person didn't normally act that way. So as the leader, what do you do? Well, number one, I could stop the meeting and say, Chris, that behavior is unacceptable. Well, everyone else in the room thinks, okay, I guess I'll get publicly assassinated one day as well. Number two, you do nothing, which means everybody in the room says, well, why do we have this value about creating positive, lasting memories? Chris is being a jerk and nobody's doing anything about it. So the meeting ended. So I said to Chris, hey, got a minute, Chris? Let's go for a walk. So we walked out of our building, and I started looking in a trash can and under a tree and behind a car. And Chris says, what the hell are you doing, Garry? I said, Chris, the you I know and love was not in that room today. I've seen you consistently live our value of creating positive, lasting memories. You weren't doing that. Chris, what's on your mind? What's getting in your way? How can I help you? Chris says, oh, sorry, I had a bad morning. I got up late, kicked my foot on the bed, spilled coffee in my car. But there was nothing really. It was just bad. So we had a little coaching session, a little redirection, and he said, yeah, you're right. So Chris goes back inside, and I noticed he goes to a few people that are at the meeting. He goes to Mark and says, Mark, hey, Mark, I'm sorry. That wasn't me this morning. Mark says, I know it wasn't you, Chris. Are you okay? What's on your mind? How can I help you? The next day, I see Mark going to Chris and asking him, is everything okay today? There is a true example of how if you define what the value is, you can act on it, and look how it happened. Beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful. And I was thinking about accelerators. That's an accelerator of the leadership culture that you wanted to, of coaches, even with, posh offices, maybe realizing that their primary goal is to be in service to others.
Garry, let's talk. You had mentioned earlier that some people, as you began this process at WD-40, said, you know what, this just isn't for me. I choose to opt out. I enjoy my command and control environment, especially the control part of it. And so this isn't for me. So one of the things Chris and I talk about all the time is positive attrition. And so as you work with your clients now, and certainly as you lived the experience at WD-40, tell us about the role positive attrition played, where people just said, you know what, this isn't for me. This is soft. I don't need this mamby-pamby crap. Nope, I'm out. So
Yeah. Okay.
good thing.
Good thing. My answer to that would be, Mark, you're obviously not happy here. I want you to be happy. So how can we find you a place where you can be happy? So I'll help you leave. You can leave with respect and dignity, but if you're not happy, we're not going to change. And I want you to be happy. I want you to go home happy. And if you're not going home from here happy, well, why don't you find a place where you can do that? And that happens. And we had that happen. And also I did share a couple of people with competitors as well who couldn't make up their mind that they weren't happy.
Well, I'll share with you, and Chris, I don't think I'm telling anything completely out of school, but we mentioned we did a group Zoom call yesterday, and with that frontline team, and they were not shy at all about sharing that some people just shouldn't be there, leaders and their brothers on the plant floor, but literally for years, and when I've mentioned specifically, I've been here for 2 years and it hasn't changed one little bit. And they called Chris and I out and said, "You've been working with this company for 2.5 years. I've been here for 2. I haven't seen any change at all at my level. So what are you guys going to do about it?" And so Chris and I had to explain this tolerance of the Chris that was in that meeting that you just described, where he wasn't making the conversation better than he left it, or making people feel better than he usually did. Well, if that keeps going, if that keeps happening and that person doesn't change, who's accountable for making that change, and how swiftly should it happen?
Well, the leader, because the leader's responsibility is to build a culture that is enduring for all. And, the worst thing you can have is a performer who is toxic to the culture. So, you know, if when I was at school many years ago in Australia, my science teacher gave me a petri dish, and they said, "We're going to grow culture in this petri dish. Two things are important: the ingredients and how you take care of the ingredients." So, as the owner of the petri dish or the leader, you've got to feed the good ingredients so they continue to flourish. You have to be brave enough to attack the toxins, because once those toxins get in that petri dish, eventually they will kill the culture, no doubt. And unfortunately, we seem to hang on to that high performer who's getting the high perform, but you know what? All of those little ingredients around them are going sour.
And it's so interesting because that is, with this particular client, there are some leaders they know fall short, and they fall short every shift. And it's like, well, but she has great technical skills. Doesn't matter. So it's I think part of the opportunity that leaders can take from this. Almost an hour already. It's gone by very quickly, Garry. We're so appreciative of your insights, is that you can't tolerate crappy behavior. You just can't, because it's going to kill the culture that you want.
Or it will stop you from building the culture you need.
Very well said.
Let me go off script just for a second. My wife is an executive with an aerospace company, and it's performance review time. And she was really struggling with the performance review, the actual writing of it, finding the right words. And she was trying to praise a person who had already gotten a bad review from his peers. And I said, when it gets right down to it, perhaps cultures aren't toxic, but people are, individuals are. And when that came out of my mouth, I went, holy crap, I should have thought of that a long time ago. And it gets back to this accountability thing. It gets back to the leadership thing. It gets back to the toleration thing, that if we know somebody isn't a good fit, if they have no interest in making everybody's day better, if they have no interest of living the mission, no interest in modeling the values, then that person by definition, I guess, could be considered toxic. And as you said, Garry, let's let them go be happy somewhere else. As I formed that thought last night, I'm going to mention this on our recording today, because I wonder how many leaders think that way, that I have a toxic culture, I need to change my culture, but I'm not willing to change people. Can that work?
Well, culture is made up of people. So if you've got toxic people, you've got a toxic culture.
Yeah.
No
Even one, we say, if you have one toxic player, everybody knows, number one.
Yep. Everyone
and
knows.
They're all waiting for leadership to do the right thing. Well, we have had a wonderful conversation with you, Garry. I want to leave you with the opportunity to say, how can people get in touch with you and learn more about not only the Coming Donkey book, but the Any Dumbass Can Do It?
I didn't say I was going to write it. I said I had a thought.
It's a good thought.
But thank you, Chris, and thank you, Mark, and thank you for doing what you're doing, because, by you helping share the message and share our experiences, we can make the world a better place. If people want to tag along, follow me on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Garry with 2 R's Ridge. Go to my website, www.thelearningmoment.net. In the banner at the top, there's a drop down that says the Dumbass Quiz. Take the Dumbass Quiz. The higher your dumbass score, the further away from ALEC you are. And when you finish the quiz, I will send you a workbook that you can start looking at 4 or 5 things that you can think of in your organization. So there are the best 2 places. And of course, if you'd like to read the book, you can find it on Amazon in audio as well.
Outstanding. Well, Mark, anything to add here before we close up?
Garry, I just want to add my thanks. I have not had the privilege of knowing you as long as Chris has, but just in the few conversations we've had over the last few weeks, I've grown tremendously as a person. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bye, all. We'll see you next week.
This has been Mastering Workplace Culture. No jargon, no corporate fairy tales, just leaders who show their scars and celebrate their wins. Do something with what you heard today. Subscribe, share, take action. Creating a culture that equally values respect and results is your responsibility. Go own it. When you're ready to make that happen, we're here to help. We'll catch you in the next episode of Mastering Workplace Culture.